Hey everybody, it's Korie with CVMA, and today we're here to talk about the back stance. Now we're going to start right away with the structure of what a back stance looks like. A back stance is a 70-30 stance, which means that 70% of the weight is on the back leg, 30% of the weight is on the front. Now when we step out into a back stance, it looks similar to the way we step out for a front stance. So if I was going to step out with my left leg, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my right foot and I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. So what I don't want to do is pick up my foot and move it, because that's going to change the distribution of my weight in the stance and it's going to make that stance a little more awkward to get into. So all I want to do is take the right foot and turn it directly to 90 degrees out toward the outside of the body. So I'm going to look down at the left leg, and kind of like we did with the front stance, I'm going to draw a line across my big toe. I'm going to pick up my foot, put my heel right at the line, set the foot down, draw the line again, pick the foot up, set the foot down with the heel right against that new line. Now, everybody's a little bit different, I think, on this stance. For me, I like to kick this foot out just a little bit more, maybe a half a step. From a comfort perspective, you might like your foot where it is. You might have to move your foot out a little bit more. But you do want at least 2 foot distances in between your feet. You don't want to be too close to where you're trying to settle up into a stance with your feet too close together, because it's going to change the joint stacking and the weight distribution in your stance. It's going to make the stance pretty much unable to be used for combat. So I'm going to set the foot out. I need to make sure I'm making an L with my feet here, so I don't want this back foot to start creeping in or creeping out. So it should make a nice L. And when I set into this stance, again, 70% of the weight is on this back leg. So I'm going to sit down toward this back leg. Now, what I want to make sure of is when I sit down that I'm sitting straight back toward my foot. I don't want to just squat straight down, because that's going to put weight evenly on both legs. So I'm going to sort of shift my weight back, and as I shift my weight back, I'm going to turn my hips to about 45 degrees. So all in one motion, it kind of is like a corkscrew motion. So I'm going to sit down toward the back foot as I move the hips to 45 degrees. That's going to put me in the right position. What that's going to do is it's going to open up this hip and put this knee right over my foot. If I just sit straight down here, it's going to push that knee past the foot and make my structure unable to be used in combat. So, but if I just turn my body, it's going to draw the knee in, which is again going to make that real hard to use in combat. So I'm going to 45 degrees sit down toward my back foot. I don't want to turn too far, as that's going to bring this knee in as well. So 45 degrees sit down toward the foot. Now, from your hands, you can put your hands at your ribs. I don't like this, as I feel it tends to turn my body a little bit this way, so I'm going to bring them up just to a standard guarded position. And this is pretty much structure for your back stance. Now, a few keys to notice here. First thing is, this front knee is slightly bent. So I don't want this to be completely straight. Obviously, that's real bad if my attacker's in front of me. That's an easy target, both for being kicked through and hyperextending, but also for a sweep, because this leg can easily be swept out from under me and cause me to widen my stance, thereby widening my dead zone and putting me in a bad spot. So I need a little bit of bend in this knee. The second thing is, I don't want this hip to close. As it closes, you can see what it does to my foot and my knee. So I need to make sure that this hip is open. Same with this hip. If I open this hip and close this back hip, it brings my knee in. So it's almost like somebody is sitting down here pushing on both knees, opening both knees up. As you're standing in this stance, you have a tendency to want to relax, which will then start to draw this knee in. So keeping that pressure in the middle of the foot, even maybe a little bit, for me, I have flat feet, so maybe a little bit toward the outside of my foot to keep that arch secure, is going to make this foot a little more stable, and it's going to stop that knee from wanting to come inside of inside the body here and ruin the structure of your stance. If I look at my feet, I want to make sure that my feet are not in line such that my heel touches the middle of my foot. So what I mean by that is, if I bring this foot a little bit more behind here, what this does is it starts to cross step, which means that my front foot is on the opposite side of my back foot, right? So instead of opening the body this way, we're going to start to close the body this way. That's really bad for combat. That puts you in a position where your only escape is to go backwards and show your back to your opponent, which is a big no-no for defense. So I want to make sure that, if anything, my heels are in line or slightly offline. Not too wide. Being too wide, again, is a mobility issue, and it puts you in sort of a position where movement becomes a little more difficult here, even for evasive type movement. So this is not good for me either. So it's a happy medium, right in the middle here. Now, as I'm in this stance, if I feel like I'm falling a little farther back here, like I'm going to tip over towards the back of me, I might have this foot out too far, and I might think I'm sitting straight down, like you're trying to sit on a chair behind you. That's going to pull you that way. So again, it's important that you're sitting down toward your foot, not toward your back. So that's pretty much structure of a back stance. Now, again, on the right side, it's the same thing. If I wanted to step out right side, I would turn this left foot, draw the line, pick my foot up, draw the line, pick my foot up. Again, a little bit of more movement here just for me. Settle back, corkscrew, sitting back toward the foot, making sure I have a little bend here, and bringing my hands up to guarded position. So when you're in a back stance, one of the things you want to really keep an eye on is your joint stacking. As I was talking about before, the knees in the back stance can really come out of alignment real quick, and you may not even know it. So I'm going to go this way so you can see this. But if I'm in a back stance this way, and then all of a sudden I turn, but I turn a little too quick, and I'm not paying attention to it, this knee is going to come in. And you can see how that doesn't look good at all. And if I take pressure back this way, that's what's going to give first. So again, that idea of opening the knees, both hips staying open, and as you turn, you're letting that knee more drift toward the front of the foot is what you're looking for. Now again, we don't want to go too far here. As you can see, I start to fall, right? So no knee over the foot. We talk about that in the fundamental concepts video, right? And so if your knee's over the foot, that's going to put you off balance as well. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that as we turn the hips, that the knee settles properly in place. And as this other knee sort of lends, toward that motion of opening up, as it goes into alignment, we want to make sure that it goes into alignment and stays there. That as you settle your stance, it doesn't want to then roll back in because you feel a pull in your hips. So hip flexibility could cause this stance to feel a little awkward. So the best way to get around that is to just keep doing the stance and just let those hips get used to that widening motion. Butterfly stretch can help there. There are some other stretches that you can look up that can help open those hips a little bit more and make that feel a little more natural to you. So we know how to stand now. Now we need to figure out how to move. So we're going to go out into a back stance here. The first thing about movement in a back stance is that you don't want to throw your hips. All right. A lot of times when I see people start to move in a back stance, the first thing they do is they push off and they throw their hips forward. Well, that's going to get you where you want to go, but if you're ever attacked in motion, that's a really bad spot to be in. So instead of thinking push and draw the hips forward and throw the hips forward, we're going to push and turn the hips. What this is going to do is this is going to allow this back leg to glide forward, and it's going to keep the hips pretty much in the middle of this motion the entire time, so that you're never really off balance. So as I push off this back leg, I'm going to twist. And as I push and twist, I'm going to draw that leg up forward with me. Now when I meet in the middle, both legs are still engaged, right? I don't want to stand straight up, so I don't want to come from here and stand straight up and bob my head, right? I want to come up, let this foot glide up, turning the hips, letting the hips meet in the middle. Now, I'm going to let this foot continue, and as it continues out forward, I'm going to rotate this foot on the balls of the feet into position. I don't want to turn on the heel because as I sit and I turn on the heel, there's too much of a tendency to want to fall into it this way and really open that foot up. So I want to avoid that. I want to move on the ball of my foot. So as I meet in the middle and I start stepping out, I'm going to rotate on the ball of the foot, set myself in place. Now, again, as you're moving, you're going to have to judge how far that foot goes forward. So if you're having some trouble with this and you really want to set yourself up to get this correct, at least from a movement perspective, bring yourself here and start the process over again. Turn the foot, draw the line, little step out, settle the weight. That'll put you in the right spot. Now, as you get better at that, you can start to sort of see those moves in your head as you step that foot out. Okay, 2.5 steps would be about there for me. So I'm going to set the foot there and try it, see what happens, right? Now, if you're having trouble turning this foot, a lot of people, when they do this and they step out and they go, I can't, this foot doesn't feel like it wants to move real well. That could be the way you're distributing your weight. So as I step out into this stance and I step forward, I have to transfer weight for a moment. So I'm going to transfer a little bit of weight here. Now, not all of it. I'm not going to push myself forward. But I'm going to transfer a little bit of weight here so that I have enough to turn this foot. And for me, when I come forward, I actually, you can kind of see here, I'll try to do it this way so you can see. I come up on the ball of my foot slightly here. Here. Kind of like you're walking, but I'm doing that a little bit for exaggeration, so not that much. But as I come out, I come up to here and settle. That lets this foot move a little bit easier. So transfer a little bit of extra weight to that front leg, not all of it, and then let this foot sort of, as your hips turn, as your hips turn, your foot turns as well. So try to make it all one motion if you can. So again, settling here, I'm coming forward, meeting in the middle, not standing straight up, letting this foot glide out, turning as I turn the hips, and settling myself in position. Again, if I step the other way, meeting in the middle, the now advancing foot's going to step out and the turn, balls of the feet, settle in stance. We look at this from a side view, you're going to see how when I step forward, my hips never really push forward or pull back. They pretty much stay in the middle the entire time. So as I come to here, as I come out, they're still about in the middle of this stance. So again, I don't want to come up here and shove my hips forward and then push them back. That's a weight distribution issue. And with your hips moving forward like that, you're really committing a lot of weight to that front leg, which is dangerous if your opponent knows that's where you're going. So hips stay in the middle. We move fluidly, settle forward, let the advancing foot travel through, turn the feet, and settle into stance. So that's basic movement. If we want to move backwards, it's the same thing in reverse. So now, instead of pushing forward, I'm going to push backwards. And I'm going to draw the hips to center, letting this leg kind of follow along. So I turn here. As I bring that foot back, I let the hips settle in place, which turns this foot, gets me settled forward again. I let the retreating and settle. Now, important key here, I don't want to step this foot back and then turn it sideways and just set it down. What that does is it can put you in a position where you step too far on the outside of the foot and roll it. So I like to say test the waters first, right? So if the water's cold, you're going to test the water here. You're not going to just kind of shove your whole foot back there and fall in, right? So as I bring this retreating foot back, I'm going to let it go through, but I'm going to test that water first. Find the position here. And then once I feel like I'm in a good spot, I'm going to let that foot rotate, and it's going to bring me to the ground. Now, this is kind of hard to do in practice, but it's something you'll get over time. You also don't want to, imagine you're picking up a sack and you were just kind of throwing it down, you're kind of making that arcing motion. You don't want to do that with your weight. You don't want your weight to bob up and then settle hard down on that foot. You want it to move sort of like you were moving stuff on top of a table. The stuff on the table is never going to change its level. Same goes for this. So as I settle forward, as I settle backwards, I'm going to let that weight stay on the same plane that it was on. This way I don't put too much extra torque on this foot and risk coming down where my joint's not stacked and putting me in a position where I'm going to hurt myself, right? So you want to let that weight glide backwards, stay on the same plane, let the foot turn you and bring the hips into proper positioning to then set yourself in the proper stance. So that's forward and backward movement. So we've got everything except for the turn. Now, the back stance doesn't necessarily have a form turn like the front stance does. We just have a technical turn. So if I'm facing forward and I want to turn into a back stance, the one thing I don't want to do is bring the retreat, what's going to be the new front leg backwards toward me. Because now I can't see my target. They're directly behind me. I'm showing my back to them. This is really bad for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to address towards them. So the first thing I need to do is get some weight off of this front leg. Because big key to this is this leg now has to move. It can't stay where it's at. I can't just turn my feet, because now, I mean, you can see that my stance is not in a position where I'd want to be, receiving energy from directly behind me here. So I have to move this foot. So the first thing I have to do is get weight off of it. So what I want to avoid is cutting this into multiple chunks. So what I don't want to do is put the weight back, move the foot, put the weight back, twist the foot, put the weight back on this leg, and then go into stance. It's way too many movements for me. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to transfer the weight and turn this foot at the same time, here. Now that this foot's in about the right spot, I'm going to let my hips move this foot and put this foot in the right place. So as I shift my hips and I settle back, again with that corkscrew motion, toward what's now my back foot, it's going to draw this front foot across my stance and put me in the right position. So if I was turning toward you, again, the first thing I'm going to do is transfer the weight and turn this foot. That starts to dress me towards my opponent in this direction. If worse came to worse, I could recover from here and defend myself a little bit easier than if I tried to bring this foot up here first and turn around the other way, which is really going to put me in a bad spot. So as I'm turning, the last thing I want to do is turn this way. So the first thing I'm going to do, push weight back to what's going to become my back leg, and turn it at the same time. That's going to start to draw this foot toward the right direction. It's going to start to draw the hips back 45. It's going to start pushing weight toward this back leg. I'm not advancing toward this opponent in case he's real close. And then as I bring this foot across, I'm going to let my hips do that work to put this foot in the right place and to put this foot in the right place. Let this foot come across. Now, a lot of times, if you're doing this and you're feeling like this foot is not moving as easy as it could, you probably have a little too much weight on it still. So instead of really shifting that weight back, you're kind of keeping, you're kind of coming here to where you're 50-50, and then you got to really kind of throw that leg forward to get you in the right spot. So let that weight again shift and glide back toward what's going to be the back foot. As it turns, that weight is now there. Most of my weight's off this leg. I'm already about 70-30. So all I have to do now is let this foot shift forward as I bring my hips around with it. So that's the back stance. Again, key points, 70-30, more weight on the back leg than the front. Front knee never locked, always bent slightly, but not enough to take more than 30% of the weight. Foot here is forward, not turned in this way where you're closing the hip. A little bit of inward turn here is not bad, but we don't want enough to where it starts turning this hip away. Knees are open, so open toward the foot, open toward the foot. Again, joint stacking, really important here, especially on the support leg. And then hips are 45, facing 45, right? More back toward the back leg and 45, so not turned in 90, not turned away 90. And when you're moving, you're maintaining the same level here. Feet meet in the middle. Don't throw the hips. Let the hips glide naturally forward. Let the advancing leg step out as you turn the back leg and settle into position. And when you turn, you're always bringing this leg across the stance, not leaving it where it is and stepping out to here. As you're turning the foot, you're letting that foot move and come into proper position. So that's back stance. I'm Korie with CVMA. Hope to see you again next time.